Welcome to War Room Impeachment. This is the 29th of October, the year of our Lord 2019, Episode 10. War Room Impeachment. Stephen K. Bannon live at the Breitbart Embassy in the War Room. You got Raheem Kassam, Jason Miller, and a very honored special guest we're going to announce in one moment. Raheem Kassam was the reason we have Raheem Kassam. He ran the War Room for the UK Independent Party and also was a major factor when Nigel Farage led the charge for Brexit. A lot of news out of the United Kingdom today, our mother country, that we'll get to in a second. Jason Miller here ran the War Room for Trump 2016, the greatest come-from-behind victory in the history of the United States. Elective politics, and was our transition communications chief. Guys, thank you very much. Very honored. We're going to get to a summary where we stand. Very honored to welcome Nigel Farage.
Pleasure
from the
to be
United
here.
Kingdom.
Pleasure to be here. Tough times, though, both sides of the pond.
The nullification project has worked pretty well so far, right? We got in the United Kingdom today. They're announcing maybe a new election, and it's pretty amazing how these things are in sync. Announcing a vote in December in a new election because on All Hallows Eve at midnight or at 10 o'clock Brussels time, you're not going to be out of the EU. And I thought in June of 2016, Raheem, you told me flat out this was going to happen.
Yeah, it's just a complete refusal of our political class to accept the result of the referendum. Remarkable, some of the arguments they use. You know, we didn't know what we were voting for, which means we're cretins. We're all stupid. We're knuckle-draggers. We're racists. The whole thing was funded by the Russians. I mean, you've heard the same story here.
Same story. and on Thursday here, we're going to have a huge vote that really will reset this entire thing. Let's go to a summary. We are in a process that we've started for, 9 days, and now we've got a first big, I would say, victory. Nancy Pelosi blinked yesterday morning. And she said that we're going to have a vote. We've been talking about this is an unconstitutional process. We had David Rifkin on here Saturday. He had his op-ed in the Wall Street Journal. We had Matt Gaetz do that brilliant move last Thursday where he actually went down to the Star Chamber and showed America that this was a secret system going on of secret witnesses. Testimony that nobody heard, transcripts that were not out. Mark Meadows kept saying, hey, if people actually heard this, it wouldn't be a big deal. Jason, how big? Nancy Pelosi's not known for calling audibles, right? She's pretty slow. She's a very cautious politician. She mitigates her risk. But when she makes a move, she moves down that line and does not waver from it. Did she blink?
Absolutely, and I think this is a very big development. It's the first time that we've seen Speaker Pelosi change direction or go off course, and she's very methodical, plans things out. I say every single episode of this show that she is the best communications director on the planet, has run this thing meticulously. But this
is a masterclass in political disinformation warfare, correct?
Yes.
That's what this has been to date until she blinked yesterday.
But because of the blitzing linebackers of Lee Zeldin and Andy Biggs and Jim Jordan and Mark Meadows, and of course our future speaker Matt Gaetz, all of these folks blitzing forced Pelosi into a turnover. And let me talk.
This is a check down.
This is a check down. Let me check down. Throw the ball right to the other team, and let me tell you why. If you look at it, even George Stephanopoulos this morning on ABC said that Pelosi was doing this after weeks of pressure. It is very clear that her members are coming to her saying, Speaker, we're getting beaten up for this. They're saying it's unconstitutional. They're attacking the process. You have to do something to give us some coverage. So what Speaker Pelosi is very distinctly trying to do here is trying to provide political cover to those 31 freshman Democrats in districts that Trump won, try to give them cover so they can say, nope, we moved forward in a constitutional manner, to give them some political cover so they can act as though they can go back to the tall grass and let Speaker Pelosi be out in front. But this is the critical detail that everybody needs to take away here. Where Speaker Pelosi goofed is all she's doing is elevating now these freshman Democrats and making it a proxy vote. So they're going to be in the news. And we put out a call to our RNC allies, everyone on the outside, that what we should be doing is have ads up in every single district of these freshman Democratic members in districts that Trump won, calling them out for moving toward impeachment. Don't let them get away with this.
Okay, to reset this is War Room Impeachment. Stephen K. Bannon, Jason Miller, Raheem Kassam, special guest Nigel Farage in from the United Kingdom for the day. We're on the John Fredericks Radio Network. I want to thank John, and particularly last night we rode to the sound of the guns last night at 6 o'clock with a special episode. That's why this is episode 10. We want to make sure you listen to episode 9. On episode 9, we had both Matt Gaetz and Mark Meadows, who are absolutely central to the. And somebody asked me, "Are we doing the pre-screening for the Hannity show? Is that what this is? Show prep for Hannity show?" What was it? What was it that Gaetz and Meadows said last night that was so important?
I think the most important thing that Congressman Meadows brought up, and he brought up a number of things, both the political impact of what Pelosi's trying to do, backing up what we said, that Pelosi is definitely shook here, but the fact that he talked about this, that you can't unring the bell, everything that's happened up until now in this whole impeachment witch hunt has been unconstitutional. And he used a specific phrase that's very similar to what we've been saying, that what they're doing is they're tainting these previous witnesses because they've gone through and done this in a secretive process, had selective leaks. But in addition to that, they're also tainting the jury pool and the media.
Whoa.
That's
Give me that. Give me that again.
House Democrats, by pushing forward in this unconstitutional manner, have tainted all of the witnesses up until now, and they're tainting the jury pool with their leaks.
Okay, if I'm a Democrat, if I'm a guy sitting over there that said, all you guys have done is whine, Bannon's on Fox yesterday, you got your precedent, you got your policy, you got your process, we're going to get into Vindman here in a minute. We conceded on the precedent. You had Rifkin in the op-ed in the Wall Street Journal. You had him on the show on Saturday. All you did all weekend was whine about this and put pressure and talk about these 31 Democrats. We're going to get to that in a second. Now Nancy Pelosi's agreed, and on All Hallows Eve, they're going to have one of the most important votes in American political history to start a formal inquiry into the impeachment of the 45th President of the United States, Donald J. Trump. She conceded with what we wanted. Why are you today now moving? This is a typical Republican thing to move the goalpost. Now you're saying, oh, gosh, now they're going to do it. It's all tainted. You've admitted it's tainted. All the witnesses are tainted. Everything's tainted. That's going to be the argument. You're moving the goalpost. It's a classic Republican and more classic Trump move.
What I would counter with that and say that Nancy Pelosi is the master matador. She is running this thing like a bullfight. She has every single member of the media. She's flashing or waving the red flag. They all go charging for it. Then she pulls it away. What she's doing here is trying to throw down some sort of authenticity to the entire impeachment hearing.
Faux authenticity is your term. Faux authenticity.
And again,
why is that? Why is it faux?
Right, and it's not a sham process. I would call it a scam process because what they're doing is they're trying to make this sound like everything is going to be transparent and open. So let's just give them for a millisecond the benefit of the doubt that they actually would want to make this something that was transparent. Okay, release every transcript and all of the interview details for every witness up until now. Going forward, they absolutely have to make everything open and transparent, which they have not yet pledged to. And again, even if you look at Schiff's comments from last night, he made the comment that some of the upcoming hearings will be open. And so the key is they're not changing their tactics at all. As Congressman Meadows said, this is really just a messaging document and messaging scam that Speaker Pelosi is putting out there.
And here's the messaging. We want to go back. In doing this show, we want to get particularly the deplorables, because it's the deplorables at the end of the day that are going to decide this. You're actually going to be the jury, not the U.S. senators. They're just the instruments of the jury. Here's the key. Remember, we told you the House, don't listen to people that are so glib on national TV saying, the Republicans control the Senate, is going to go away. The House vote and the Senate vote are going to be inextricably linked. And here's what we said. There's three buckets or three pools of votes that you've got to be focused on. Number one is the 19 Republicans who are retiring, who, many of those are not fans of President Trump. That's pool number one. The second is the Kinzinger and maybe the folks, those 20 that are not exactly, I'm not saying they're never Trumpers, but not fans of Trump. But most importantly is these 31 Democrats, right? And you've got in Virginia 7, in the radio audience of John Frederick's radio network. You've got Abigail Spenberg in Virginia 7, which is the old Dave Bratt, which was central to immigration, one of the most important congressional districts in the country. You've got Elaine Luria down in Virginia 2. You've also got the one we've been singling out, Max Rose, and Commander Mikey Sherrill up in New Jersey 11. Those districts that Obama won twice, Trump won in 16, the Democrats then won in 18. They flipped, made Nancy Pelosi the Speaker of the House. And the reason we're here today, because remember in 18 we said once they win the House, they're going to impeach him. This is going to flush them out, is it not, Mr. Miller?
Absolutely. And that's why I said that all Republicans, the RNC, need to be calling out these freshman members and taking it right to them.
They have to make all of them famous. They have to be all famous now.
They have to be all famous because if there's no attention being paid to them, they're going to be fine to step back and say, Speaker Pelosi, You be out in the news. Adam Schiff, Jerry Nadler, you be out in the news. They want to have their
Max Rose last Thursday or Friday said, "Hey, I think this process needs to be." He says we got to go with impeachment. I'm all for it, but it's got to be accessible. It's got to be visible, right? After
Right.
Matt Gaetz broke the fever. That broke the fever. Now we're
And Lee Zeldin made a great point last night. He really detailed out some of these things. And here's where, look, we're a little bit of political Capitol Hill nerds when it comes to following this stuff, or at least I'll self-identify.
But people want inside baseball.
Right.
We're giving you
So
inside baseball
here's
now,
what
right?
people to understand. When Republicans controlled the House in 1998, and they moved to impeach Bill Clinton, there were a whole set of rights that they gave to President Clinton, allowing his lawyers to be in the room, to cross-examine. They had subpoena power, all sorts of things. So far, President Trump hasn't had any of those rights. And so until we see Speaker...
Okay, we have to see what they're going to vote on. That'll be today, I think. You need... It's the devil's in the details. This is all about granularity. This show's about granularity. You're saying it has to see the due process rights. What due process rights are set out there is the president's attorney's going to be able to sit into these depositions. Are we going to have subpoena power to bring our own witnesses? That level of detail, right?
Exactly. And this is the point that we can't let the Democrats off the hook. They cannot move forward saying that they're constitutional and they're all above board if they don't go back and apply those same processes to the previous interviews. Because, again, they've run this master campaign over the past month where President Trump has been kicked in the shins every single day in the media with no ability to push back, and they've run this because they wanted to beat up President Trump, and they now flip and be like,
remember, they had
we're the Angels.
They had 1 month, and this is what Scott Rasmussen said. They had 1 month of free shots on goal, right? 1 month of free shots on goal, and that's why the numbers started to shift. Particularly the independents. That's why Scott Rasmussen can come and say 50% of the American people now want to have a formal inquiry, impeach, and remove the President of the United States, right? That was the fire bell in the night.
In fact, I would liken it to being in a round with Mike Tyson for a round and not being able to even block your face or to cover up on that. And, of course, you're going to take some wicked shots because we've had no ability to push back. This is unconstitutional. It's a scam. They've tainted the process. They've tainted the witnesses. And Democrats need to be held accountable for what they're doing here.
What are the Republicans going to do over the next 48 hours to make sure that this is a partisan vote?
Well, you've already seen where Republicans have smartly gotten out there and calling out the Speaker and Schiff and the rest of the gang for what these details are going to be. They're getting out there and pointing out the fact that everything up until now has been the scam process and the fact that they've been doing all this behind closed doors. I think the president is going to start weighing in. I think you're going to hear a lot from him as well. So they're going to make this
you think the president will have something to say here?
I'm guessing, yes. In fact, I should have his Twitter feed up at the moment just to.
I'm sure he's going to be blowing. I'm sure. Trust me on this. As sure as the sun rises tomorrow, I'll be blowing guys up on Twitter in the morning before the vote.
But the one other thing, Steve, I'd say that we also need to make sure that we're doing, it's when we say make them famous, it's not just paid TV ads. It's working the phones, making sure that constituents are calling these freshmen members.
I don't think it needs to be paid TV ads. I think you got to make them famous by constituents calling them. Look, they represent everybody in the district, the people in the district, and particularly people out there in the radio audience ought to be calling and talking to their congressmen, talking to their staff, telling them where they come out on this.
And we need every single normal media outlet, i.e. Breitbart, Daily Caller, Daily Wire, Newsmax. We need everybody knocking on the doors or calling or showing up to these freshman Democratic members as they're coming back to their offices after a vote and asking them, why do you think that everything that's happened till now isn't unconstitutional, and why aren't you voting for something that actually is constitutional and gives President Trump equal rights? They need to be getting called out on this because, again, they're all partisan hacks. They're all going to vote the Democratic line, and they need to be held accountable.
You listen to the War Room Impeachment, 29 October, the year of our Lord 2019, Episode 10. This is the podcast that once a day for 1 hour gives you a concise assessment of what's going on with witnesses, with evidence, with process, with the policy, with the procedure, all of it right here. And normally, we always say we don't want to follow process stories. The process is the story here in the impeachment of Donald J. Trump, the 45th President of the United States. Before we go to Raheem's going to do the breakdown of today's. We're going to make Lieutenant Colonel Vindman famous today. Raheem, you've done an amazing job of making these guys famous and making them really understand what's going on with these guys testifying. I want to go to Nigel for a second. Nigel, If you had told us in June of 16, because Brexit and Trump were inextricably linked. In fact, you came up to Trump Tower, I think, the weekend Saturday, right after our victory. The president thinks the world of you. If you had said back then, because we knew it was the same revolt. It's the same revolt of the hobbits. It's the same revolt of the working class people, because so many labor people voted for Brexit, so many blue-collar Democrats voted for President Trump. If you had told us back then that on All Hallows Eve in 2019, over 3.5 years in the future, on All Hallows Eve, that you would have the announcement, Brexit, you would not be out of the European Union and actually be triggering a general election to do it all over again, and that Donald Trump on that same day, they'd be voting to start a formal inquiry to impeach Donald Trump, who would win the presidency. If we had pitched that in Hollywood, we'd been thrown out of the room, right?
Yeah, I think if you'd said that to me, Steve, then I'd have thought perhaps you'd lost your mind, because it seemed to me, in the wake of the Brexit result, actually, all the big leaders, even those who'd supported Remain, said, OK, we get it, we accept it, we will implement it. We even had a general election in 2017 when all the big parties stood saying we will honour the result of the referendum. And the key person in our story is actually our speaker as well. It's John Bercow, who has allowed Parliament...
Order!
Yeah, he's ghastly. Order! He really... Now, the good news is, we're not leaving the European Union on the 31st, but John Bercow is retiring on the 31st, and I have to say, I'm pleased to see the back of him. So what he did was, he actually broke centuries of precedent in the United Kingdom. Basically, the way our Parliament works is the only people that can propose legislation are the elected government. Bercow broke that process and allowed backbenchers to table legislation, and it's that that's tied Brexit in knots. I'll tell you what I do see, and I think why the work you're doing here is so important. Despite everything that's happened in the last 3.5 years, despite the Liberal Democrats in Britain who now literally want to cancel the result, the Labour Party, think this through. The Labour Party's policy is, if they win the general election, they will go to Brussels, negotiate a new deal, put it to the people in a referendum, and then campaign against the deal they've negotiated. The whole thing's so twisted you can't believe it. And yet, public opinion, despite all of this,
yes,
public opinion is holding rock solid.
Yes.
And if you give people the binary choice, do you want to leave with a clean break, just get the hell out of here, or do you want to stay? We've got big leads on our side. So overall, I'm not discouraged that public opinion has managed to withstand all of this. The problem is that the problem we face, Steve, is this. Theresa May was hopeless, and we learned yesterday.
Yeah, we saw that when she came over and met with President Trump.
But we learned yesterday for the first time, we'd not heard this before, that on the night of the result, so 3 o'clock in the morning, the official result comes through and Leave has won, Theresa May cried. She was so upset with the result. Then she became Prime Minister, promising to honour it, and frankly what she did was just to betray it.
This is exactly, by the way, wasn't it, didn't somebody testify, or somebody that's out there in the ether, that Fiona Hill cried on the night that Donald Trump won? These things are inextricably linked. The established order, Raheem, I'm going to come to you in a second. The established order, the City of London and the corporatists have just done a beat down, this Project Fear.
Yes.
This project, same thing, this is why it's inextricably linked. The party of Davos, okay? The capital markets, the corporatist, the media, that's their propaganda department, right? Whether it's Wall Street, the City of London, whether it's the corporations in Europe or in England and here in the United States, they are virulently against working class and middle class people having a say-so. Whether that's Nigel Farage and the UKIP party bringing Brexit, they fought it every day. Project Fear, all this thing, the same way they've done on President Trump's economic program. Yesterday, I think it was Kramer, the tariffs are working. The country is, we're getting more economically robust because of Donald Trump's economic nationalism. America first, national economic policy, just like your policies about having the UK, people control their own destinies, get your sovereignty back. The established order hates this.
Well, it's globalism, isn't it? That's what it is, and people talk about capitalism. We're not living in capitalism. We're living through global corporatism, where big business and big government act hand in glove. And Project Fear, we had it during the referendum. Now we're told that if we leave with a clean break, it will have catastrophic economic consequences. They've even told us that if we leave the EU, there'll be no medicines.
No,
There'll be
it's
food
ridiculous.
shortages. Now, I made the point that during the war, the German U-boats sunk a lot of ships, and we still didn't starve. But this is actually what's going on, and yet it's not working anymore. The public are just saying, "The hell with this. We don't believe you
Well,
anymore."
I think that's what's happened here in the United States. Let's go. We're going to come back to Nigel after the break. Raheem, before we go to break, I want you to talk about today's witness. This thing was a firestorm last night on Laura Ingraham. We're going to get into this controversy, but let's talk about who's actually, you mentioned him over the weekend. Let's talk about who's on deck today.
Over the weekend, I mean, we were talking about this the day we launched the show. Who are the star witnesses going to be? The people who were unheard of, and one of those people is Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Vindman, arriving today for his testimony in full military uniform. This is a show.
He's an active duty Army officer.
But this is all there for the cameras, walking outside, parading in front of the cameras. This is somebody whose testimony leaks magically again last night to the New York Times.
New York Times, CNN, right away. And as Jason Miller would say, there are more guys on the byline than there are anonymous quotes in the story. There are 5 guys at CNN. It's a perfectly formed story. I don't think they put that together in 2 minutes.
There are 6 pages of this opening statement that he's going to give today in front of the House, and we've gone through it all, and we can pick out the main points of it for you. But it's very much in the same vein.
Before we're going to do after the break, we're going to go through his testimony about what his letter is. But I want to talk about Vindman as a person and as. There's this firestorm last night. John Yoo was on the Laura Ingraham show to start this off. What did she say that Morning Joe actually had a melt at CNN and Morning Joe? They had dual meltdowns this morning about this, right? What was it that Laura Ingraham and John Yoo from the Bush administration? What did they talk about that was so? Got so crazy.
Well, I mean, people have been reporting this Laura Ingraham segment with John Yoo, by the way, not exactly a known frothing at the mouth xenophobe, a very serious figure, John Yoo from the Claremont Institute. They were getting.
Well, I don't know. He wrote the torture memo for the left. I mean, dude, he wrote the torture memo, right? Look, I'm a big John Yoo fan, but I mean, just the mention of his name is a triggering event for the left.
But I mean, really,
maybe Laura, maybe that's not the guy you have on to discuss this.
A very serious person.
Oh, very serious. Yes. By the way, the memo stood up over time.
He's not going on there throwing out random statements. He's thinking very seriously about this stuff. And the word espionage comes up last night in the context of why was Alex Vindman, as somebody of Ukrainian descent, an American citizen, Purple Heart awardee, why was he talking about the closeness of the relationship with Ukraine as it pertained to what he wanted to see a continuation of previous Bush admin and Obama admin policy? Now, the word espionage comes up because of the back channels that are going on between the Ukrainians and the people on the NSC. We're gonna get into that.
We've got a hard stop at 29. We're going to come at 30. Okay, we're going to come back. This is War Room Impeachment. Stephen K. Bannon, got Nigel Farage, Raheem Kassam, Jason Miller. We'll be back.
War Room Impeachment. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
Welcome back to the War Room Impeachment, 29 October, year of our Lord 2019, episode 10. We're live on the John Fredericks Radio Network. I want to thank John Fredericks and his entire staff for making this possible. We wouldn't be able to do it without him. In the War Room today, a special guest, Nigel Farage from the United Kingdom on a historic day there. We're going to get to Nigel in a second. We got Raheem Kassam, who kind of was Nigel's wingman, has run war rooms, was managing editor of Breitbart during the Brexit vote, which is historic, which they're still fighting about, and we're going to talk about that. And Jason Miller, the 2016 Strategic Communications Director of the Trump campaign, and just a real warhorse. Okay, I want to go to let's make Lieutenant Colonel. If on CNN, he just walked in uniform. He's a Lieutenant Colonel, active duty Army officer. He's an Iraq War vet, awarded the Purple Heart, wounded in combat, and walked in today to give his testimony, his deposition in the Star Chamber, which nobody can see, down in the skiff in the bottom of the House of Representatives in the Adam Schiff's Intelligence Committee. So, Raheem, take it away.
So we've been talking about Vindman for a while now. Alexander Vindman, he is a 2-decade-long officer for
Colonel
the US.
Colonel Alexander Vindman.
Lieutenant Colonel Alexander S. Vindman, if you like. Infantry officer, multiple tours abroad, South Korea, Germany, deployment to Iraq, and he was wounded in an IED attack, awarded a Purple Heart.
And he walked in, and on CNN right now, he walked in uniform, right?
He walks in the U.S. Army uniform, which I think is a little bit ironic given his testimony where he clearly states he has this affinity towards his home country, Ukraine. And not my words, the words of the New York Times, quote, because he emigrated from Ukraine along with his family when he was a child and is fluent in Ukrainian and Russian, Ukrainian officials sought advice from him about how to deal with Mr. Giuliani, though they typically communicated in English. Now, this is the New York Times saying that. There's a lot of things going on, just to remind people of what we talked about in the last segment. Laura Ingram's show last night, John Yoo on there, people talking about espionage, people talking about back channels, people talking about why is this guy talking typically in English to the Ukrainians about all of this stuff. And I think when you dissect his testimony here, as we've gone through this thing, there's a lot of red flags in here for me.
Okay, I want to talk about that because you're doing what Laura Ingraham did. You're questioning an active duty. You're questioning an active duty Army officer who served his country, right? Served his country in combat and was wounded, could have been killed, served his country, and you're questioning his patriotism and his loyalty.
Yeah, in the very same way that we rightly, I think, called into question Bill Taylor and Bill Taylor's testimonies.
You didn't call in question their patriotism.
I absolutely did.
No, you called into question their like the British Foreign Service.
Yes.
Very different. Very different. You called into question clientism.
Yes.
The Arabists, as we call them, from the British Foreign Service, that the State Department. Remember, our institutions are fairly similar. The State Department, the British Foreign Service, has clientism, where you fall in love with the local culture, and you turn out representing that. And Taylor's very specific when he was hired. Remember, ladies and gentlemen, that Ambassador Taylor, another former Army officer, was hired, a West Point graduate, was hired by a West Point graduate, Mike Pompeo, and he told Pompeo in his own opening statement that, hey, I believe in really the Obama or the way the apparatus has been handling Ukraine, which we're going to get to Nigel Farage in a second. This all goes back into history. It's all tied together, right? I support the Obama policies. I don't understand Trump's policies, but what I understand, I don't support. But why are you taking it to another level? Why are John Yoo, Laura Ingraham, and Raheem Kassam all questioning his patriotism?
I'll tell you exactly why. Because of what you mentioned. It comes from the same place. It comes from a place where these guys don't believe, and it's clear in his testimony, in Vindman's testimony right here in front of me, that these guys don't believe that their job is to implement the policy of the President of the United States. He says in his conclusion,
that's clientism.
He says, that's fine, Steve. It comes from the same place.
Absolutely not. It's a big difference.
I'm going to quote, I was worried about the implications for the U.S. government's support of Ukraine. I realized that if Ukraine pursued an investigation into the Bidens and Burisma, it would likely be interpreted as a partisan play, which would undoubtedly result in Ukraine losing the bipartisan support it has thus far maintained.
Is that not the type of advice you want somebody, Jason Miller, on the National Security Council, somebody to the type of
Ukraine,
advice,
maybe
the type of advice you want to go up to John Bolton to say, hey, we've got a bipartisan approach here because we have the globalists in the Democratic Party that support the Obama stuff, that we may lose the bipartisan nature? Is that outside of his writ?
He's not a political strategist. He's a policy person, an unelected bureaucrat. And, Steve, this goes to the number one point.
Go ahead. Say unelected radical bureaucrat. Go ahead.
Yes,
put
radicalized.
Put
radical bureaucrat, right? I mean, let's go. I think it's all fair. And actually, backing up for a moment to what Raheem was saying, look, Vindman leads his testimony with talking about being born in Ukraine and still having great love for the region. When you lead with your chin like that, you're going to get criticized.
If you and I were prepping this guy, we say you got to address the Ukrainian thing up front. Let's get it up in the first couple of paragraphs. I disagree with you there.
Okay, we're going to disagree.
Okay, fine.
But let me tell
you would hide that back in the back?
I would lead with the fact that he's a Purple Heart, that he's decorated, that he's been in all these different tours of duty.
Right.
But here's the thing where I'm directly questioning Vindman, and I think everybody should be hammering on. It's his making an intentional effort to undermine the commander-in-chief. You, ladies and gentlemen, turn on CNN, watch this gentleman walking into the House in full uniform. This is a coup. We're watching a political coup on TV in real time. That is exactly what's happening. You're having a lieutenant colonel walk in and undermine the president of the United States, undermining the chain of command. I think that
guy who's still serving on the NSC, by the way.
Still in the NSC. In my opinion, that is the unpatriotic
Is
act.
this 7 days in May, Raheem Kassam?
Look, I just want to get back to this question because it's a very important question. I know we're going to get attacked for this, and I'm happy to lean into it. Any of the shows want me on tonight to attack me, I'm here for it. Okay, you can't start your testimony by saying in a non-dispassionate way, my family fled the Soviet Union. You are they're goading us with this. Well, guess what? We have to lean into this. There is obviously, in this testimony,
Let's go through the testimony.
Everyone to read it, especially look at page 2. Okay, this is a very, very important part. Quote, I want the committees to know that I am not the whistleblower who brought this issue to the CIA and the committee's attention. I do not know who the whistleblower is, and I would not feel comfortable to speculate as to the identity of the whistleblower. BS. There is no way that I am very well sourced on this. There is no way that this person does not know who the whistleblower is, and it may go so far as who did he speak to the whistleblower? I want to know that question. That's what I think the question needs to be asked.
We say already they're talking about they've got other stuff that came out on CNN. He complained immediately after the call, right? This guy had direct access to the call. Did he not complain immediately that he thought the president was out of bounds?
He listened to it 4 days after.
4 days after.
Yeah.
He listened to 4 days out of recording.
Yeah.
This also gets me why they got these recordings around. It's absolutely ridiculous that they have this stuff. I think, I don't remember FDR. Yeah, I haven't sat there and listened to the Nigel. I haven't listened to the recordings of Churchill and FDR. I mean, I don't know if these guys at this level you should be recording these.
No,
calls.
I mean leaders need some discretion, don't they? And I think the way this president is just recorded, staff leave and turn against him. I agree with you. The guy is your commander in chief. He needs to be able to have confidential conversations, and without that, how on earth can you lead? How on earth can you go through a thought decision-making process?
Do you think what you're seeing now, at least in this opening statement, that this guy was one of the people that went either to the whistleblower or went to a senior officer, and then that became part of what the whistleblower was talking about?
I believe there is reason to believe that.
Okay.
I'm not going to say for certain that this guy was the source for the whistleblower, but I believe that question needs to be asked. There is also one more thing, and again, it's great to have this inside baseball stuff because people need to know
the details.
Details of this. I want to read you something from just very quickly the 10th of July. Right, this is following a debriefing meeting after they met, and they being Ambassadors Volker, Sondland, Rick Perry, National Security Advisor John Bolton. They met with Alexander Danieluk, the Secretary of the National Security and Defense Council for Ukraine. And I quote this. Following the debriefing meeting, I reported my concerns to the NSC's lead counsel. Dr. Hill also reported the incident to the NSC's lead counsel. Now, he's talking about concerns over what Ambassador Sondland said regarding investigations, what they call in the media the quid pro quo. But here's an interesting detail. NSC's lead counsel, who is also an NSC legal council member, it's Yevgeny Vindman, Alex Vindman's brother.
Alex Vindman's brother is a lawyer on the National Security Council.
So it's not like he can say, hey, I'm going to this independent person. He's going to his brother.
You used a hot term. I'll turn to Nigel in a second, but why, even we're talking about Ukraine, you used the word coup. That's a pretty loaded term.
Very much so. But that's
anonymous book is coming out on November 19th. The vote originally in Nancy Pelosi's to impeach the president was scheduled when they first started around November 21st. The anonymous book, which Anonymous came out over a year ago, said that was an appointed official of President Trump, and they were documenting this. The anonymous book is supposed to have direct conversations with President Trump in the Oval Office. I said at the time on the circus on Showtime over a year ago that was the beginning of a coup, just like McClellan tried to do against Lincoln before the Battle of Antietam, that this was the potential of a coup.
Well, and Steve, I would rewind the clock even more and say that the coup started when first it was the popular vote trying to undermine President Trump. Then it was James Comey. Then it was the whole wild Russia investigation that wasted 2 years and tens of millions of dollars to get nowhere. And now we're here. An important point that Mark Meadows made on our show last night was that this effort by Democrats to undermine President Trump and to move toward impeachment, they've already been decided on this since day one.
The nullification project, to nullify his presidency.
Right, but Steve, I can't stress enough, the reason why I call this a political coup, you turn on TV, you see a man walking into the building in full uniform, directly undermining the chain of command and second-guessing the President of the United States. The president doesn't even know who this guy is. And he's coming in and trying to undermine. You look at his comments, Steve, we have said over and over this week, this is about a policy disagreement that these unelected bureaucrats have with the president, and they don't like his America First agenda, and they're trying to undermine it.
Let's go to that policy difference. Why are we even talking about the Ukraine? How did this whole rat's nest even start? Nigel, because you were there at the beginning of this.
Oh, yeah. I was trying to call it out very early. So, look, the whole battle here that's going on, both with Brexit and with this impeachment process, this is globalism v nationalism. That underlines everything that is going on here. The European Union, anybody in America that thinks the European Union is just a sort of peaceful getting together of countries that used to fight each other and now we trade with each other and love each other and it's wonderful, do not understand that the European Union is the prototype. You know, had Hillary won the election, she actually wanted America to join in with the European single market. They are trying to recreate a form of global government, and with that is foreign policy. So why did the Ukraine blow up? Why has it dominated so much of our discussion ever since? Well, I'll tell you why. Because the European Union's foreign policy is they wanted to expand to the east and for the Ukraine to become part of the European Union, and worse than that, we even had idiots like David Cameron suggesting the Ukraine join NATO. Now, you are then pushing directly into Putin's
the Ukraine
Russian
was the
interest.
killing field in World War II, right? Between
Absolutely.
the Nazis and the Russian defense thing. This was 15 million people or some humongous.
Appalling things that took place there. But so what happened here is, you know, Putin. Whatever you think of Putin, I mean, he is there to defend the Russian national interest, and if you encroach on his territory up to his borders, he sees that as a threat. If you poke the Russian bear with a stick, don't be surprised when he fights
So
back.
your critics are going to say, jump in here, Raheem. Your critics are going to say this is once again Trump's a Russian asset. Trump's Putin's buddy. Trump loves Nigel Farage on the payroll of the Russians. Nigel Farage has been out there promoting the Russians. How do you defend against that?
I am telling you that what happened in the Ukraine was a coup took place, an elected president was removed. Now, whether he was corrupt or not is a separate issue. He was an elected president. He was removed in Kiev in a coup by people waving the flag of the European Union. All right? It was expansionism and globalism that has led to all
What
of
year?
this.
That was
Nigel,
2013.
Would you call it regime change? It was supported by US and EU.
Oh, yes.
Regime change policy.
Absolutely.
This
And-
was
and-
central to Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton, John Kerry's, that foreign policy of the globalists, that wing of the Democratic Party.
Yes, and they act together, don't they? You know, I mean,
And David Cameron.
the same policy decisions in the Ukraine, the same policy decisions about Iran, for argument's sake. You know, all of these things are being decided by the globalists, and I don't think the general public actually understand the background of this. They
do not.
They don't get.
It's hidden from them.
The sheer level of ambition that the globalists have, and you know, far from it. I would make this point. Far from the European Union bringing peace, they directly caused the war, Crimea, and all of those things. And I would even go further back and say that the EU's recognition of Croatia actually sparked off the Balkan Wars as well.
You know, you have a situation in Syria now. This president is being criticized for what's going on in Syria. Why does nobody talk about the 13,000 Ukrainians who have now died as a result of both the EU's and the US's regime change?
But I want to bring both you guys back to today's testimony. What the lieutenant colonel is saying, correct me if I'm wrong, because I think it's important for the audience to understand. What he is saying is he supports that policy. What he supports in his his issue about bipartisanship is to make sure that the Hillary Clinton, John Kerry, Barack Obama globalist nature of the of that kind of corporatist part of the Democratic Party that's what he supports. That's when we say this is a policy, it's precedent about is this thing legal or not, or is it sham or not. It is a process about is it hidden or not. But the policy debate is about this right here, is this globalist nature, and that's what the lieutenant colonel of Ukrainian extraction descent is supported, correct?
And that is why, you know, if I was employed by the White House, you wouldn't put me on the UK desk, right? It is not appropriate, and I will say that myself.
In 2013, you were actually there. This is what we're talking about, that revolution. You were actually in the streets. John McCain was also there, was he not? And what did John McCain do?
let's be clear about this. John McCain was standing on stage with the head of a party called Svoboda. This was an overtly neo-Nazi party that just so happened to believe in the same regime change. They wanted rid of the president of Ukraine at that point in time, and they stood shoulder to shoulder. This isn't a conspiracy theory, ladies and gentlemen. Look it up. There are pictures of McCain with the head of Svoboda.
Because John McCain, he's the one that's beating on President Trump about NATO. He's the one beating on President Trump about the EU. What did he in that wing of the established Republican Party, what did they support?
Look, remember when Mitt Romney said the primary opponent on the global stage to the United States is Russia? Now, you and I knew at that point
and Obama
it.
heckled him, and Obama, the hypocrite, heckled him by saying, hey, the 1980s called and wants their foreign policy back.
Now, actually, Obama had a point there, because it was China we should have been looking at.
He was, but he never did that. This is my point. I keep saying this is a sideshow to a sideshow. The only thing that matters is China, and that's what you got to focus on. But when Obama said that, the hypocrisy, the pivot to Asia was hypocrisy. Their central focus was always Russia, right? And that's and because the EU wanted to expand.
Yeah, and this shows you how dangerous the globalist project is, because, of course, there is actually no democratic means of checking these people. Who decides EU foreign policy? How does a voter in a general election in France or Britain or Germany?
Well, you tried it. That's what Brexit was about. You tried it, and they've overturned. They talk about democracy, but yet you had the Brexit referendum, and you've had the election of Donald Trump, and from the minute they both happened, they have tried to use Project Fear to overturn this. Right? That's a nullification project.
Yeah, it is, and we're at a key moment here, aren't we? Because I've got this feeling. 2020 obviously matters hugely here in the USA. Getting a proper Brexit delivers hugely, and I think we are actually at a moment here within the next few months when we're either going to see that what we all worked for in 2016 succeeds and changes the world and gets the nation state back to being the unit with power, or we're going to lose. I mean, we're coming to the end game of this. I really believe that.
I want to come back to the election in a second. We got a few minutes left. Let's go back. Anything else on Vindman? Anything else today that the audience at home ought to be focused on in the misinformation campaign? How is the media going to spin Vindman? We know he's a war hero. By the way, I do agree. I don't question Vindman's patriotism at all. He's a combat officer, infantry officer that was wounded in combat. I do think he's got clientism, which is the problem that you see here, and he supports obviously the policies of Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama. What else about Vindman?
I like hearing when Jason asks the questions that should be being asked of these witnesses. Jason, if you were in that testimony today, what would you be asking?
I would be asking if he has spoken directly with the whistleblower. I would ask if he provided information to the whistleblower. I would ask him why, as someone who's a lieutenant colonel, who's earned a Purple Heart, who literally wears it on his sleeve, that he's a patriot, why is he actively undermining the President of the United States, undermining the chain of command, and what lesson does he believe that that's sending to future troops or future members of the armed services when he's parading in front of the cameras on national TV saying, you know what, I no longer respect this commander-in-chief.
Is it amazing to you that he still goes to the West Wing every day, and he's actually on the National Security Council
Why
today?
is he still in the building? Why is Bill Taylor? Why did he even get on a plane to go back to Ukraine? They literally should have said, "Here's a camper. You now live. We're going to relocate you to Arizona." Or your job in Ukraine is done. We'll send you a FedEx with all your stuff. Why are we sending these people back to their jobs?
Anything else on Vindman before we turn to Nigel to wrap this up? Okay, let's today. Historic on St. Hallows Eve. There's going to be you're not at 10 o'clock at night. You're not going to be out of the European Union like you were supposed to be.
No,
right over 3 years, and we're going to have this historic vote to begin a formal inquiry into the impeachment of Donald J. Trump, the 45th President of the United States. Why are they tied together? Why is this important? What's going to happen in the United Kingdom? And are you going to field a team?
So we're going to have a vote today in London about having a general election. It will go through. So we'll have an election on December the 12th. And here's the problem. We've got the forces of Remain, the globalists. We've got the Liberal Democrats who want to literally cancel the result of the referendum. It seems incredible, but that's where they are. We've got Labour, I've explained already. They want a second referendum, but basically keep us inextricably linked. We've then got my position, which is the Leave position, which is we leave the institutions of the European Union and become an independent
including
country.
their foreign policy. So no longer are you involved in Ukraine unless the United Kingdom and the United States as allies want to do that.
And here's the problem. Boris Johnson, who is very jolly, brings a lot of energy and a lot of optimism and is 1,000 times better than Theresa May, and you know both of them, Steve. But here's the problem. Boris has basically picked up Mrs. May's failed deal. It is not a deal. It is an EU treaty, binding in international law, overseen by the European Court of Justice, that commits us in foreign policy not to deviate from the policy of the European Union, and in terms of a future trade deal, commits us to regulatory alignment on social policy, employment policy, all legislation on the environment, and even on taxation. And Boris is trying to deliver Brexit in name only to an exhausted public who, after 3.5 years, say, if it sounds great, it must be. It's not great. And if Boris signs this, my view is that we will not have a proper trade deal with the USA. So I'm saying this. I'm saying this. We're the Brexit party. We won the European elections. I am saying this. Boris, you've got a general election. It's a chance to press the reset button. It's a chance to drop the treaty and to go simply for a free trade deal, or we leave on WTO terms.
And you're in foreign policy that way.
We don't want to be tied on foreign policy or anything else. And I'm really worried about that, Steve.
We got 60 seconds left. I want to talk about the exhaustion. People in this audience, the deplorables, the hobbits, they have jobs. This is the backbone of America. The Trump following is the backbone of America. They're tired. They're tired of every day this relentless attack upon President Trump. Like, talk about exhaustion and what people need to do, because if we don't galvanize now, it's all going to be over.
As I said a few moments ago, we are reaching the end game of all of this. Either we win or lose this in the course of the next year, and that will determine decades of our future. People, don't give up. You voted the right way. Make sure you vote again. Put as much pressure as you can on politicians who are betraying those results in 2016. Keep fighting.
Nigel Farage, the head of the Brexit Party, a